I mentioned how art in America can get really edgy, and how a lot of Americans are calling for mass censorship of an unprecedented level over a celebrity activist, Charlie Kirk, dying, but they don't have the same vigor to protect the imagery of Jesus, and Jesus was, according to their narrative, not ours as Muslims, but theirs, brutally flogged and crucified, right? So, Charlie died faster than Jesus died, right? And Jesus died for the Christian sins. Charlie died for, there's a number of theories, one could argue, for his own rhetoric, right? What his own hands brought forth, even though there should be civil dialogue, but he got under the nerves of some people, and they decided to enact retribution. So, I wanted to bring your attention here to something I learned about in one of my philosophy classes, and the classes I took on aesthetics, which was the piss Christ. And when I first heard about this, it really made me angry. But I don't think a lot of people realize this moment in history. So I thought I'd share it here. So, Immersion Piss Christ is a 1987 photograph by the American artist and photographer Andres Serrano. It depicts a small plastic crucifix submerged in a small glass tank of the artist's urine. The piece was a winner of the Southeastern Center for Contemporary Arts Awards in the Visual Arts competition, which was sponsored in part by the National Endowment for the Arts, a United States government agency that offers support and funding for artistic projects. And then here you see the Piss Christ. This work generated much controversy based on assertions that it was blasphemous. Serrano said of the controversy, "I had no idea Piss Christ would get the attention it did, since I meant neither blasphemy nor offense by it. I've been a Catholic all my life, so I'm a follower of Christ." So, see that? Hey, I love Jesus, let me put him in P. So again, this won an award, right? And let's click on this real quick. And so, the NEA is an independent agency of the United States federal government that offers support and funding for projects exhibiting artistic excellence. So, America thought, this is excellent. Yeah, let's put Jesus, who some feel is God or the Son of God, in urine. And urine is, is gross. To put something holy in something that's not holy, right? Bodily fluids is disrespectful, obviously, right? And it says here, it was created in 1965 as an independent agency of the federal government by an act of the U.S. Congress signed by President Lyndon B. Johnson on September 29, 1965. And so, it's just fascinating seeing the level of censorship being called for over a civilian, but how it wasn't called for over what some feel is their deity in a Christian, quote-unquote, Christian nation. Ibsen's Passion of the Christ really had strong imagery of the suffering of Jesus, according to their narrative. And so I wanted you to really get an example of, in this movie, the extensions of the flogging and how much he suffered, and yet he isn't as defended as Charlie Kirk's being defended. Could this be a form of idolatry? I'd be very curious, because people have been comparing Charlie Kirk to Jesus. Sky News did that, and I'll show you that later on, in either this video or another one. But that's pretty intense to, to assert such a thing. So I wanted to, if you haven't seen this movie, I guess if you're into theology and whatnot, or art in general, that would be something to examine. But the extensive suffering of Jesus and damage done to his flesh versus Charlie Kirk's rapid relief from his mortal coil, one could argue. He didn't have a prolonged suffering like Jesus. So I'm just trying to really vet out the example of people were shocked by Charlie's demise, which it is shocking. But they should have more vigor towards defending Jesus than they do. Park is also known to have mocked Jesus. They mock everyone. However, they pulled their Charlie Kirk episode where they mocked him. Okay, so they pulled the episode where they mocked Kirk, but not where they mocked Jesus, because they feared MAGA getting mad over Kirk, but not Christians getting mad over Jesus' mockery. Here is the evidence that South Park pulled the episode for Charlie Kirk after he was assassinated. They satirized him beforehand. They pulled it, and meanwhile they still have the mockery of Jesus up. And then this is like his main profile page, how it looks. And then this is like his main profile page, how it looks. Now this MAGA person says, "You killed the one man that was willing to come to you peacefully and debate. The talking is over." Let's break this down. So the one man. This means that MAGA only has one man. So that means 99%, literally the majority, overwhelmingly, are not willing to come to a peaceful debate. She thinks she made a point here, but she actually showed how nefarious the MAGA people are then, right? And she's hinting at a threat. The talking is over. Once the talking is done, that's when things get physical. So when people say, "Oh, no one on the right is threatening anything," clearly they are. Let us not mince words here, okay? And then she's mother of two, Christian, and she says she's a constitutionalist. Think about that. Think about it. Alpha cunt. So Christian and then alpha cunt. Does the Bible tell Christian women to be cunts? Think about it. So again, you have a very strange insanity around Trump. It's a very sick sect of Christianity. And they really are obsessed with this man. And now Kirk has been placed really high. So she is a mom, okay? She's got 71,000 followers. Macedonia, right? She says, so she's like, hey, I say America Stan to hint at America becoming Islamic. She says Macedonia, so she's a Magatardian. And she's like, hey, I'm gonna mix the uncouthness of Trump's trolling and his behavior with Christianity. So they really invent their own ethics of Christianity, right? They have their own way. So again, admitting that MAGA could only find one person who was willing to have a peaceful debate, and now that that one guy is gone, all bets are off. I also mentioned in one of my community posts, no, not community, well, both on the community posts, but I made it short, how people are going to pick the bones of Charlie Kirk. And what you see here is that they're going to use him to be like, I'm on a list, help me, help me. And now you have this really grotesque human being who has an adult store with his daughter. I mean, it's really sick. He's now saying, hey, I need money, so give me money. And he has a GoFundMe. Isn't that odd? He's a genocidal maniac. And he's like, I'm a victim. And his rhetoric is way more disrespectful. He's very, very, like, oh my goodness. People talk about, what is that word? Physiognomy? Physiognomy? I can't say it right now. But how someone looks, hinting at their psychology and their spiritual state. And this guy, he's fundraising, like, with no shame, and being like, I'm next. So you're gonna see a lot of influencers come out. Even Tate did this and be like, I'm on a list. Help me, give me money for protection. No evidence, right? No evidence. So they're placing themselves on like, oh, I'm next, help me everybody. I'm a victim, give me money. So it's like gross, isn't it? Here we had another conservative who I followed for a while, and he's encouraging doxing. Now, what's strange is that I can clearly remember how many Magatardians under Biden were doxed. And when Trump first came into office, I mean, the left went scorched earth on so many of them, and MAGA was super upset, right? They're like, okay, we gotta hide being Trump supporters. And it was a tense time in America. But look, you tell a salty joke, even though MAGA memes the hell out of everyone, and they claim to love rough comedy, and facts don't care about your feelings, they're including doxing. And people are very volatile right now. So this kind of doxing means that, like, people can show up to your home. And that type of doxing is gonna cause people to have a very hard heart, and I believe install a Democrat in the next election, because of how many people said something, just one simple post, and these people couldn't handle it, and they don't think anyone has a right to openly express how much they hated a civilian political activist. And here's some of the first images we got of him, of the shooter. White guy. A lot of people, unfortunately, if you look at the state of how everything is, breathed a sigh of relief once they found out it was a white man. Because people were scared if it's Chinese, someone's going to be like, we need to deport all Chinese students. We remember Marco Rubio had that post where they were going to deport so many Chinese students simply for being Chinese. And people would have blamed all blacks, just like that schizophrenic black guy with dreads who shanked the Ukrainian woman on the bus, which was super tragic. They blamed all blacks. They do a lot of group blaming, except for when it's a white man. So a lot of people were relieved that it was a white man. If it would have been an immigrant, a Latino immigrant, they would have said shut down the border, invade Mexico, Mexico sending assassins. If it would have been a Muslim, they would have said this was from Iran, you know. So again, we have these images here to kind of just highlight how everything unfolded, because people were waiting. People were eager to see, who is this person? What's it all about? There was so much tension. And he's from a Christian Republican family, grew up in Utah, a majority white Republican Christian state. And, you know, his childhood was filled with classic gun nut culture. So there's that. So these was some of the photographs of this guy who did something quite horrendous. This was his side profile, and people were examining the size of his nose and shape of his head. People were wondering if he's on SSRIs, so there's that. A little bit about Valhalla, okay? So this will become more clear when you see how Kash Patel, the guy with the googly eyes, mentions Valhalla. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because that's very paganistic. Christians historically fought against the pagans, and it's the Groypers who have that ethos around them, whereas Kirk wasn't loved by the Groypers. So this is a very weird thing for someone who's brown like Kash Patel to say. And so let's examine this real quick, okay? So white supremacists are misappropriating Norse mythology, says expert. Scandinavian studies professor debunks idea of racial purity that makes racist extremists identify with Viking culture. Okay? So here you see Viking symbolism, and they use it to justify their xenophobia, the acts of violence. Okay? So Viking symbols are everywhere among the ultra-right. When the Unite the Right rally took place in Charlottesville in 2017, some protesters carried banners featuring the Norse god Thor's hammer, popular among the Nazis and neo-Nazi groups. the perpetrator of New Zealand's Christchurch massacre last year, wrote, "See you in Valhalla," referring to the Great Hall where heroes of Norse mythology go after they die at the end of his manifesto. So notice this. How do you put it? So the right wing has become more and more anti-immigration. They're saying, oh, mass deportations, we voted for this. They're pissed off at the people from India coming over on H-1B visas. They think that every brown Muslim should not be allowed to exist. And Kirk hated Muslims, and oftentimes Americans see an Arab and they think they must be Muslim, and they think that Islam is a race, when in reality Islam is a religion, and you can be Chinese, Malaysian, Indonesian, Irish, you name it. But again, there's a lot of ignorance around the American mind when it comes to Islam. So they have to know that. So we'll keep going here. Closer to home, the soldiers of Odin, a Finnish white supremacist movement named after another Norse god in 2015, have recently emerged in Alberta and throughout Canada. The precedent was set with the Nazis, said Van Dusen. National Socialism and Hitler idealized the Norse people, those who lived in the Nordic areas. Even the swastika is based in part of the symbol based on the Viking artifacts. A popular text among the Nazis was Germania by the Roman historian Tacitus, who describes Germanic peoples as a pure and corrupted race. So you see the connection here with Valhalla, the white supremacist groups, Kash Patel, MAGA, Groypers hating Kirk, what Kirk fought for. You see what I'm saying? So it's something to think about and examine. Sí, mi amor. Soy ocupada, mi amor.
What
are we doing? We're recording this video. So it says here, the Viking Age and Norse mythology are of particular interest in these groups, who have committed acts of violence against perceived outsiders such as Jays, Muslims, and people of color. So remember, the Groypers are people who say things like mud shark and other things, and you're a race traitor if you've decided to reproduce with a different skin shade. You know, there's a lot going on there, but it all ties into the far right agenda. So is it appropriate that Kash Patel says something like that? It's a huge dog whistle. In particular is The Last Kingdom, which I've seen. It's really great acting. This is Uhtred Ragnarsson, and I had a parrot named after this character. So, and I often would watch this show, and I even got my hair cut on the side like that before I was a Muslim. So I was definitely part of that, like, oh, we got some warrior movie going on here. And I was not a white nationalist, astaghfirullah, but some people, also there's another show called Vikings that people adopted, but it just portrayed people fighting against the Christians, and this made a lot of people inspired. And then this is Father Bayaka, and he's like a Catholic priest. He tries to guide Uhtred's heathen heart. He's a mediator in between them. And then that's Alfred and his wife is a great example of the meanness of some Christian women. And Alfred is an example of a religious Christian king who doesn't like the pagans at all. Okay? And then another picture of Uhtred. So, again, there's a lot here to unpack, but if you're not familiar with this show and with that little time period where the pagans were super popular, then this will help you to understand. And this character, obviously, because his dad was a leader, his dad was killed, and he was sent to live with the pagans, the Danes. Okay? There's a long story, I'm not going to get into it, but he was pretty much raised that way. And they would say to each other, "See you in Valhalla," and whatnot. So here we got to see some images from the New York Post in this video of what he looks like. And people were surprised. He looks quite lanky. He got a $32K college scholarship. Talk about jelly. Man. I wish I could have got something like that. I mean, he just wasted his life. Talk about getting the golden egg and then just tossing it out the window. You know, so many people in college debt can't afford to go. This guy gets a $32K scholarship. Boop! Decides to do something retarded and end up in prison forever and get the death penalty most likely. This was also an interesting image because he's very outdoorsy, right? And a lot of right-wingers, Republicans, they love hunting and fishing. And he clearly here knows a little bit about the outdoor life because remember, a lot of conservatives think that you can make a man masculine and moral through the outdoors. Bushcraft, camping, hiking, you name it. And then you see here, you know, just like that's like the average white guy, you know. And then he's also learned a bit more about aviation. Here you see he gets to actually play around with a lot of big cool weapons. So he was a marksman. He was a guy who I used to watch back a while ago, and I unsubbed from him when I found out, well, rather started to notice his anti-Islam stance. And this guy, he created a video around Charlie Kirk, and it's strange to me because it's like, it seems so fake. Like an audience capture. If you grovel, you're gonna get views and you're gonna go up. It doesn't feel genuine. If this person, like all these influencers, they didn't say anything about Turning Point USA before. I mean, they don't even seem to have the same values. But it does appear that he dislikes Muslims and he has a bit of a racial tone. Remember, there's a growing angst of the white man to think that he's being genocided. Alright? Even though a lot of liberals, you know, men and women, they believe abortion is fine and women who are white do get abortions. Okay? So, you also have to think about how many Republican Christian women, they're not having 5, 7 kids, and probably having, I think on average it's like no more than 3. So if you have people aborting their babies and not having a bunch of babies, and some, you know, staying on birth control for extended period of time is messing up their fertility, you know, you can see you're not going to have as many people born who are white. And these people, they seem to really care about whiteness, and they get offended with the hijab. And you can see that he also mocks people for caring about Gaza, and he also, because he talks about the Freedom Flotilla of Greta Thunberg, and he makes soft comments about Muslims, where it's like you won't violate the TOS, but everyone knows what you're hinting at. And so it's fascinating how when someone who's brown does something, the entire race is blamed. When a Muslim does something, all Muslims are blamed, but when it's a white guy, the race isn't blamed. His family was Christian, the Christians aren't blamed for how they raised him, but it's now just their political party. So, something to think about. But I don't know how so many of the MAGA people fall for this. How this people like Daniel Boland, they didn't talk anything about Kirk when he was alive. They didn't go to his events, they didn't promote him. But when he dies, they're like acting like they're getting ready to cry. You know, very peculiar. Now, what's interesting about this Joey Manorino guy is he's clearly a homosexual Italian, and he talks like in a very tenacious, vulgar, aggressive way. It's very uncouth. It's really strange to behold. I bet you he would be terrified if someone got into a fist fight with him. His keyboard warrior-esque persona is like WWE. Like, you know, the WWF, when they changed it, the World Wrestling Federation. It's very contrived. And I thought it was interesting how his language here, now, I'm no fan of the eunuch Frankensteins. The Prophet, peace be upon him, cursed men who dress like women and women who dress like men. I've shared that screenshot of the hadith that is sahih, right? But I'm just pointing out how his language doesn't add up to their right desire to not have violent rhetoric, okay? He calls them creatures, and then he says no mercies and calls them a species. Okay? And then talks about ending tolerance. So again, when it's a heterosexual, heterosexuals aren't blamed. When it's a cross-dressing Buffalo Bill, they're like, hey, we have to get all of them. Meanwhile, I'll have you realize these same people are kicking it with Blair White, a male who's gotten tons of plastic surgery to imitate a woman. Very strange. Very, very strange. Now, Homath, I really enjoyed some of his takes back in the day. Then, little by little, he started slandering Islam, and I was like, okay, well, forget you. But I still follow him on X to see his nonsense, because he's kind of growing in influential stuff. So, there's that. But I wanted to share something with you, because it just shows you the hypocrisy in rhetoric standards. It says 100% of Democrats are bad people that can't be spoken to. Think about that. Okay, what are we getting at here? If they can't be spoken to, that means only violence is left. What? 100% of Democrats are bad people? So the granny who's like working at the voting office, like the voting booth, you know, when it's time to vote and there's volunteers who are helping. So let's say you got this average Democrat lady, you know, she's got a babushka persona. She's got little short hair. She's got a flower shirt on, a little handmade bag she got from Etsy, and she's the enemy now, and you can't talk to her. It's what? And this guy makes fun of women and says a lot of things like, oh, women are dumb, they're emotional, you can't do this with them. And yet, look at his generalizations here, his grouping. It's something to think about, right? Because when you just say 100% of people you can't even talk to them, that's absurd. Because if your ideas really are good, they're gonna get through people, okay? And if you can't sell your ideas and you can't convince people, sometimes it's not that the ideas are bad, but that the messenger is bad, right? And he says we have to literally march them into FEMA camps where they will stay until death, doing hard labor under penalty of starvation. This is very strong rhetoric. Okay, now, back in the day I had a playlist, The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and I deleted it. I just wanted to free up some space on my channel, but it's a fascinating book about how terrible gulags were. Now, you have to understand, FEMA camps are a scary word in the conservative movement. They were, like Alex Jones, you can maybe look up, well, a lot of his stuff's been banned, but he since like the early 2000s, was always talking about FEMA camps and martial law, right? He's also had some DVD documentaries that he's always talking about FEMA's gonna round people up, okay? And remember, during COVID, a lot of people they didn't want the Chinese model where people were put into camps, because China had facilities like outdoor facilities, like where you look it up, where they put people, okay, and you were segregated, even children, until you were better. China didn't play, and people were terrified of that. Okay, so you have the Russian-esque gulag and the Chinese form of segregating people. So hard labor is hinting at gulags. I think there should be labor camps for violent criminal offenders. Okay, he thinks your average Democrat, because he said 100%, and he's not playing games here. Okay, he's trying to act tough. Okay, so let's really examine his words here. Okay, because there's gonna be a low IQ, mentally ill Republican magatard who wants to be the hero and might lash out at the average Democrat because they've been listening to too many people who are instigators, provocateurs, who they ain't about that life. They're not gonna do it, but they want you to do it as they sit back and watch. And then when you do it, they're gonna disavow you to save their own butt, so they don't get deplatformed and demonetized, right? So the working on a hard labor simply because you're a Democrat. And what are some democratic principles? Tuition-free college, universal health care. These are, they want universal child care, universal basic income once AI takes over. They're not that bad. I mean, the rainbow stuff is pretty absurd. But if you really get to the nitty-gritty, you're like, okay, it's not end of the world. And like I said, there's a difference between Bill Clinton and Bernie Sanders, the former Dianne Feinstein, John McCain, Obama versus Gavin Newsom. But in the end, the Democrat Party changes over time, just like the Republican Party. But the language here, death, starvation, being marched, it's very communistic, right? And remember, the neoconservatives, they still live in the Cold War model in their brains, and they're like, Russia's coming, they're coming on us. And so him using this language evokes this sort of Russian iconography in our brains. And so here it says, by Cynical Publius, I'd like to comment on a little recognized effect. I believe Kirk says, let's ignore that. Never mind. But the point is that he has taken your average Democrat and grouped them in with the actions of this one person who, at the time he tweeted this, we did not know that he was someone who might be gay. And remember, there's gay Republicans, Milo Yiannopoulos, so someone being gay doesn't automatically make them liberal, right? Blair White is a trans, you see? So, that Joey Manorino guy, you clearly tell he's gonna have to wear an adult diaper when he's older. But the thing is, you can't just say because someone's gay, they're a Democrat. There was zero evidence at this time. Now, there was people mocking Kirk, but again, ho math mocks dumb hoes all the time. So I just find it that the people who want censorship, they don't want people to pearl clutch them, but they pearl clutch others. It's very peculiar. And so, the violent rhetoric of marching people against their will and denying them ability to speak and risking starvation, which is a slow, agonizing death, is quite horrendous. So, again, I wanted to document this because it just shows the hysteria, the frenzy, and these people say they want to have a patriarchy, but you can't be a leader of the patriarchy when you're freaking out like this. I mean, this is Laura Loomer Looney levels of hysteria here. This account I found to be quite gross. It's capitalizing off of murder, right? And his name. But notice how they're creating lists and databases. before, the right wing was terrified of lists. Oh, we're on a secret list. Oh, the CIA. Oh, Mossad. They're coming to get us. The lists. It's not a good thing. They don't like lists. And so even The Office made a joke about lists and how being on a list makes people really paranoid. And so they're doxing people. And they're making a large archive. Now remember, you can use AI to fake tweets. These people are not fact-checking. They're sending the mob to people without actually verifying if certain submissions are real. Think about that. And vigilante people who are wanting to be heroes at this tense time, they could show up to someone's house, to someone's job, right? And that's really scary. So again, they say political violence is not the answer, yet they're kind of dog whistling for it. This was a meme that I saved on my Instagram from Luke We Are Change, and he solely showed he don't like Muslims, so I stopped following him and I stopped watching his content. But I just want to show you some of the hypocrisy here. Remember, because of Kirk, many people are canceling people and enacting swift censorship measures, as I've shown you in previous videos and in the community posts. So when it comes to Justin Trudeau, it says, "I'll shut down your bank account." That's referring to the trucker convoy that was over the vaccine mandates during COVID in Canada. So people who donated to the Freedom Convoy, they had their bank accounts frozen. And this was really scary for people because they're like, hey, that's unprecedented. The next is Mark Zuckerberg, who is like, hey, if you violate the TOS, you'll get banned. And during January 6th, I and many others, if we made spicy memes, we were not allowed to create groups anymore, and we're really throttled after that. And then Bill Gates here, shut down your farmlands because he's bought so much, right? And then has Joe Biden here, like, oh, I'll shut down your electric car. And then Fauci, I'll shut down your social life because he mandated the lockdowns. And then Klaus Schwab on the bottom, and you'll own nothing and be happy. Remember, the right wing was saying that you shouldn't be allowed to work again and you should have your license revoked if you said some salty things about Kirk, who hated you and you hated him. They expect people to say nice things about someone who despised them and didn't like them. I mean, that's a tough call. And especially when you consider how satire culture is in America. There isn't a lot of what they call sacred cows. Everyone gets mocked. I mean, when the Queen of England died, I saw spicy memes, and no one was deplatformed for that. And she was a posh, kind, presenting woman her entire life. Not at all as controversial as Charlie Kirk, yet no one was banned for making memes about the dead Queen of England. What I liked about this post is it highlights how Elon Musk, when he took over, right, he wanted to help people have freedom of speech, and he hid the like button. Like on Instagram, for instance, if you like something, others can see it. But he took away so you can't see what people liked anymore. And then that actually caused so many people to be more authentic and be their true self. And he also here says that he would help fund legal bills for people who posted something that their employer didn't like. But now you see MAGA doing the opposite, right? Now they're supporting you being fired, and they're creating websites and databases doxing people.